Hires is another tragic example of the growing violence being aimed at Texas police officers.
Night Beat's Phil Alvarado shows us how police are arming themselves with better training for a case of self-defense.
ATF agents are gunned down in the Waco shootout. 5 days later, police officers are shot in a Dallas raid. A day later, a Haltom City officer is killed. Police say these deadly scenes are becoming a bigger part of their daily lives.
It's a very short, little, tiny movement.
It's what John Painter calls physical knowledge control. It means staying alive.
You can break a pair of handcuffs apart just like that. That is what strikes fear into an officer's heart.
Police officers across North Texas are paying their own hard-earned money to supplement the training they received at the police academy.
It takes 1,500 hours to become a beautician in the state of Texas, and what, 600 hours, 400 hours in some places to become a police officer.
We're not trying to, condemn any academy or their, or the training that they're receiving. We just think things can be better.
What you do as quickly as you can when you think I'm going to move. Where are you going?
Down.
Right. See, and look, I've got the knife.
Yeah. With a knife or a gun, I wasn't much of a threat. A lesson Officer Trace Carpenter had to learn on the street.
I was very fortunate that the individual wasn't trained on really how to use that knife. Had he been trained to a level of proficiency, I would have been laying there on the ground dead.
Sir, will you drop that bat, please, sir? Put the bat down, sir. Put the bat down now.
With attacks on police up 200% nationwide, police say the mean streets of today don't give a cop a second chance.
Down now. All the way.
In Fort Worth, Phil Alvarado, News 4 Texas.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome back. And I am Violet Lee, and your Tai Chi examiner. If you have watched the first 3 episodes of Life in Time with Dr. John Painter, you probably enjoying them very much so. If you have not done so, I will highly recommend you to go back, and I will put the link underneath this video, and so you can go back. And today, we have Dr. John Painter here in the studio. And John, you look very handsome with your shirt. And that looks like a ranger shirt. And then previously you were in the, how should I say, traditional Chinese outfit. You look more Chinese than I was. But today you're in this nice shirt. And tell me a little bit about the shirt. And then also, I heard people call you Captain John and Captain Painter instead of Master Painter. So
never master, no.
So what's with this title? And
that was Sifu Henry. That was Sifu Henry Look's favorite name for me. He always called me Captain John, but the title Captain is from the company that myself and some Texas Rangers and other people started, called the American Rangers Law Enforcement Martial Training Institute, or ARMLETI.
A very long name.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? ARMLETI. And this is one of the shirts that we wore when we were teaching law enforcement. We had a very professional company that went all over the country and even Canada and other places, training law enforcement and military. I started out as a young boy. We talked about earlier, learning from my teacher, Li Long Dao, who had been a bodyguard and a soldier in Chiang Kai-shek's army. But my dad was a lawyer, and he had an office right across the street from the courthouse in East Texas, in Longview. And I used to hang out at the sheriff's office. They had a sheriff's office there, and the sheriff was Noble Crawford was his name. He was an old school sheriff. And so I really hung out there a lot and got very interested in the way they handle themselves in the law enforcement. And for a time, I thought maybe I ought to be a sheriff's officer, but things went in a different direction, as you well know from our previous interviews. I got involved in being a magician, and then later being a bodyguard and then ending up working for the mafia and so on.
Yeah, you use the opposite side of the
Yes,
law
yes.
enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. But well, I started thinking about the law enforcement stuff after I had opened my first kung fu school. We were teaching Lee Family's methods, and I had a couple of police officers who were studying with us as well, just for their own personal well-being. And one night, one of them did not show up for class, and the other one was there, but he seemed kind of despondent. And I asked him, I said, Jim, what's the matter? And he says, well, my partner was killed night before last in a domestic call. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, he was killed. He went to a trailer house where the man and woman were fighting and beating each other up. And he tried to arrest the husband. And when he did, the woman hit him in the head with a baseball bat and killed him. I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You know, he said, yeah, we're not trained sometimes to handle some of these things as well as we should be. And I said, really? I said, well, did he use anything that I'd taught him? He said, well, we're not that far along yet, but frankly, some of the things you're teaching us, they won't let us use in the police department because they can hurt somebody too much. And our job is to arrest and detain and take the people to jail so they can be, looked at by the courts. And I said, wow. So I thought about this for a while, Violet, and I started thinking, and I started researching police training. And I was looking into it, and I was saying, this is pretty sad, what I'm finding here, especially in Texas, that you have to spend more hours learning to be a beautician than you do to be a police officer. And out of all those hours learning to be a police officer, only a very few of them are actually devoted to what you would call martial arts, but would be called defensive tactics, is what they call it in law enforcement. And sometimes that's not near enough time to be able to really master a technique or something like that. So as time went on, I continued to think about this, and then the terrible Rodney King incident happened in California, where some officers who were not very well trained tried to stop a big, heavy-set black guy with their batons, and they were hitting him like little kids, and it didn't do any good. And there were lawsuits, and the guy was hurt, and it was terrible. So I knew a Tai Chi instructor, she and her husband, from the Tai Chi farm, actually, and she was the producer for the Phil Donahue show, which was a big deal back in those days. And she called me up and she said, I think we ought to send you around the country to look at all the different types of police training, because we want to do a show on that and on the Rodney King incident. And I said, oh, well, okay, you foot the bill and I'll do it. So they did, and I went all around the country examining all the different kinds of training and law enforcement places. And what I found really shocked me. And, here's what I actually told her after I was through. She said, okay, you ready to come tell us all about it? I said, no. I said, if I were to come on your show and tell you what I discovered about police training in the United States today, I said, there'd be a general panic in the public because the training is horrendous. It's terrible. It's just not good. So she said, well, will you come on the show and talk about, what you would do? So I said, yeah, I can do that. So I went on the Donahue show, and I'll show you a clip in a little bit of what happened. So we started this American Rangers Law Enforcement Martial Training Institute with a couple of other officers and an old Texas Ranger who was advising us and so on. And that's kind of where it all started. I mean, I did not stop teaching Chinese martial arts, Violet, but I started this second company, and we were doing a lot of work with departments and so on.
That's excellent. Yeah. So were you ever a sworn police officer?
No, I was never an actual sworn police officer. I had, I was made, let me see here, here it is somewhere. I was made an honorary Texas Ranger.
Oh, wow.
by the governor back then. And then later, when I was doing bodyguard work and so on, I was a special deputy and was an executive bodyguard. This was from the Sheriff's Department in East Texas. And then I had also they sent me a beautiful Texas Rangers badge, which I cannot wear because it's illegal to wear this badge if you're not an actual Texas Ranger. So I have a lot of honorary things. And then when we were working in Ohio, I was made the Police Academy commander of the Ohio Training Center for law enforcement. And that was a big honor to me. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
We did an awful lot of training up there with both sheriff's departments, police departments, and also the ones that needed the training the most were the corrections officers, because they have to fight their way into the jail every day and fight their way out most of the time. So yeah, but I thought about being an officer and signing up and doing that, but I thought, I think instead I could make a lot more difference in the world by training all of these officers and things. And so I started working and training the trainers who trained the officers. And in that way, we pretty much influenced over 30,000 different officers in our methods called PKC, physical knowledge control. That's a kind of little aside.
Let me get it. Physical knowledge control. And can you explain a little bit? I can not really relate it to what you guys do. And go.
Yeah, and it is.
Also, your background in the Chinese martial art.
Right. Chinese martial arts. So actually, PKC is a play on words for the old way of spelling Baguazhang.
Oh,
they used to spell it Pakuachang. So I just adopted it to mean physical knowledge control.
Okay. That worked out well, I guess.
Yeah, it went over well. We worked very hard on getting techniques and methods that could be used across the board by all the different types of officers. So we copied the ranking system. You asked me about Captain Painter. We copied the ranking system of the famous Texas Rangers, and every trainer that we had to pass a very rigorous testing routine, including myself. And so we had privates, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. Each was a different level of knowledge and training. We specialized mostly in just teaching law enforcement trainers themselves. That way we could get out the message to more people. Then the trainers would go back and teach.
You also train some Navy SEALs, right? I heard.
Yes, we had a couple of Navy SEALs.
Military folks.
Yeah, we didn't actually train the whole Navy SEALs group. We had a couple of trainers who were training Navy SEALs, and we taught them some of our hand-to-hand techniques and methods. But I'll tell you a joke about that. One time I said to one of the Navy SEALs I was working with, I said, well, you're going to do hand-to-hand tactics and so on. I guess you guys really kind of need that. And he looked at me, he says, Captain Painter? I said, yeah. He said, basically, we blow stuff up, we shoot people, and if we have to start using our hands, something's gone terribly wrong. So I said, okay. and so They mostly wanted to know more about our shooting methods and so on.
So you
But that
teach
was
firearm
fun.
also?
Oh yeah,
Did you?
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Our company also had a public division, which we called the Urban Survival Division, and that was we taught a lot of ladies clubs and things like that, how to pay attention and be situational aware, not martial arts stuff, but
Oh, really?
how to
Oh,
learn
okay.
how to pay attention when you're out in public, that something might not be right or something might be wrong, so you could get out of a problem before it happened. So yeah, that we had that going on. So we were doing that and the police and everything together.
So why not teaching the ladies self defense martial art type of thing?
I'm going to tell you the absolute my truth. You know, because you're an amazing martial artist yourself, you know that to try to show somebody how to stop a punch or stop a grab or a choke can't be taught in a weekend,
No.
can't be taught in one day. You need to spend hours and hours training that method until it becomes second nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always spoken
Mm-hmm.
out against these self-defense weekend workshops, because all they really do is show people something which they're going to forget in 30 minutes after they leave there. And they paid a lot of money for something they can't really use.
Well, they may
So
get a little bit self-confidence because they thought that they might learn something, right? But I mean that's the most I can think about it. Yeah, I had that doubt myself before, and or maybe it's like a placebo effect. They say, "Oh, I've been trained, so I know what to do," but hopefully they never have to use.
the biggest secret in being able to defend yourself, especially if you're going to try to defend yourself against a really serious attack, is to have deeply set within you the will that you're going home no matter what. If you don't have that survival mindset, then no matter how many punches and kicks you know, you're probably going to get hurt very badly in an altercation. So
yeah, this is the kind of let me thought about when you talk about your teacher, and when you had the bully at school was giving you trouble, and you try to revenge. And I remember your teacher say, not just kill him, you kill all his family as well.
Yeah.
So you have to have that kind of determination and also that skill, right? And otherwise, don't do it.
Yeah, he was saying to me, if it's not that serious, don't do it. If it's not life and death, then walk away, get away from it. But now when we had the Rangers, we were actually teaching a number of different things, but they were all essentially based on three things: Tai Chi Chuan, Bakwa Zhang, and Xing Yi Chuan techniques, not the internal methods, but the techniques themselves. Because officers are not going to take time to learn the techniques. I'm sorry, they're not going to take time to learn the internal methods and meditation and all that. They're not going to do that, no matter how convincing you might make it. So we first taught hand-to-hand defense. That's somebody attacking you and so on. Then we taught weapons defense. If somebody attacks you with a weapon like a club or a knife or something like that, that was hand to hand. Now, the thing that we did with that was that it was always just one or two moves. That's it. And we drilled them over and over and over and over again until the person didn't have to even think to do it. Our next level of training was teaching them about edged weapons, knives, machetes, things like that. In Texas, you get a lot of people with machetes, just like a saber, big chopping weapon. We also taught how to use pepper spray and how to use the taser. The taser is the gun that shoots a little thing out and it's electronic like this, and it shocks the person. I've seen some people that get shot with a taser and they just pulled it out and threw it down. Those are the scary guys. We had some people down on the border, some Spanish guys who grew up eating, the hottest peppers in the world, and sprayed one guy one time with pepper spray, and he grabbed it away from the officer and went, sprayed it in his mouth. He says, "No caliente," and threw it down. No hot, no hot. So we had some fun times, but I mean, it's kind of scary when a guy does that and you're trying to arrest him, So from that, after the edge weapons, pepper spray, tasers, and so on, we taught handcuffing methods and how to transport a prisoner. Now, handcuffing basically is an art. You just think, oh, you just put the handcuffs on him and he goes off to jail. Oh, no. You have to turn the hands in a special way. You have to put them behind their back. And one of the third most dangerous times in an officer's existence is he puts the first handcuff on. And as soon as that first handcuff goes on, now this guy thinks, uh-oh, this is for real. And that's when the fight starts. And that's when the guy tries to pull away and start doing all sorts of things. So you have to be able to control that guy so that you can get the second handcuff on him and then put him in the car. Now, there are ways of doing that where he's standing up, but if he won't comply, then you have to take him down. And that's where the Bagua movements and so on came in, with going into an arm bar and things like that and taking the guy to the ground without hurting him, because you are not supposed to hurt the guy no matter what he's just done, unless you yourself as an officer are completely in fear of your life. So that was the handcuff and transport methods that we worked on.
So you say
And the final,
sorry for interrupting you.
No, fine.
Your three things is Bagua, Xingyi, and Tai Chi. And you just gave an example how Bagua Zhang was used in that situation. And can you give an example of a Tai Chi or Xingyi?
Sure. If the person laid his hand upon you, if the person was trying to punch you or whatever, the Bagua first movement is called a wedge, so that the guy's arm slides off, but then you turn it into rollback, which goes into the ward off.
Yes.
Not ward off. I mean, it goes into rollback.
Rollback, yes.
And then that becomes an arm bar, which you use to lock his arm and put him on the ground. The Xingyi essentially is the same thing, with splitting fist this way, which is very similar to the Bagua move, but it's straightforward, and it wards off the other person's attack so that you can either strike back, push, pull, or grab. So we just use those three little methods from those three arts and combined them into one, and that became the PKC concept.
I see. That's good to know. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. The methods, all of them, they came from my Sifu, Li Long Dao. And, as I said before, he was a Chinese bodyguard and a soldier in Chiang Kai-shek's army. We didn't teach anything to do with Qi or internal methods or those principles, not because they're not good, but because you've only got 30 days sometimes, or even 10 days with an officer, or even less, to try to get all these concepts across to him. And as you well know, because you teach Qigong, you can learn lots of different little moves, but if you're not really open to it, it takes a long time to begin to feel what's going on and what's happening. And
very
so
true.
we were
very true.
We were very into teaching something was extremely practical and could be used right away. So we left those kind of things out. So that's pretty much what we did. We did get kind of popular with what we were doing. So we were on television a little bit, promoting the arts. And we did local TV around here, and that got us a lot of publicity. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, we were on the Phil Donahue show. And this was a very interesting show because it had lawyers on it and police officers that had gotten in trouble in Los Angeles, and it had them all talking about the the Rodney King incident, and so on. And it was quite an interesting show. I'm going to show you a clip from that show. And one of my trainers and students went with me, and we showed them how to arrest and transport somebody.
Captain,
And that's hamstringing them.
yeah, Captain Painter, give us your demo. Make your case. I think you have
Yeah. Normally, if somebody would attack you, Harry would attack them and punch them, and you would hit them and strike them and punch them out. With our PKC method, stand back here, Harry. When he attacks me, I just use a little bit of body energy to move him back and away from me. That is not excessive violence. It doesn't hurt him. If he tries to punch me, instead of trying to punch him out, I simply take him down, put him in a place, and cuff him. This, again, is not excessive violence. Are you hurt, Harry? No. No. Say no louder.
Oh, and Phil freaked out. Phil Donahue just freaked out.
No,
So after the
great.
Donahue then came to Texas a little bit later. He was doing a show about gangs and skinheads, and he got a bunch of death threats. So his producer again, Adrian, wrote me and said, will you escort us from the airport to the studio and be Phil's bodyguard while he's here? So I said, well, yeah, of course. So myself and a couple of other Rangers, we went out and we met him at the airport and escorted him down to downtown Fort Worth and watched out for him during the whole show. And Phil was very, very impressed with what we had done on his show. So he knew we could handle ourselves. So
Excellent.
that was a really good thing for me. I mean, I was so proud to be able to be part of that. It was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think? The other martial artists, should they train police or military force? And if so, and in what way?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's not very popular when I answer it. Many martial artists claim to have taught the police. Very few actually have. Most of them, they're not lying, but they've gone to some department or some training center and done a demonstration. And then after the demonstration, they showed a few little moves and so on. But Violet, there's a huge difference between teaching and actually learning practical methods, because again, I mentioned earlier the force continuum idea.
Mm-hmm.
The officer is going to try to arrest somebody. So the first thing he's got to do is use his voice. It's called command presence. He has to use his voice in a way that makes the guy want to put on the handcuffs, get in the car, and go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Then if that doesn't work, then he has to try to physically move the person to get them to do what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't work, then he's supposed to either threaten the guy and say, okay, I'm gonna tase you, I'm gonna shoot you with the gun, or I'm gonna use the pepper spray on you. If that doesn't work, he has to use those things.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case that I mentioned earlier about the guy down in Juarez or outside of Juarez's border, no caliente, threw the thing away. Now you have to go to hands and feet and, batons and all the other stuff. The firearm's the very, very last thing you ever going to have to go to, unless the other person has got a knife or a gun is coming at you. So there's this level of things that you have to follow. Mm-hmm. And most of these people that have taught martial arts, Violet, they're used to sparring in the ring. Some of them may have had a real street fight or something, but trying to show some officer how to chop some guy in the throat or sidekick him and break his ribs doesn't follow that force continuum. So it's something they can't use unless they're absolutely in total fear of their life. So most of these martial artists don't understand that, and they show techniques that just really are not allowed. I mean, it's fun, and then they can go off and brag that they taught the police. We didn't do that, as I told you about PKC. Now, some of them have said they taught the military. Okay. The military have a very, very different set of rules. Their idea is to kill them quick and get out of there. They don't care about arresting anybody. Okay. They're going to hurt people as much as they can, as quick as they can, and move on to the next guy. Like I said, the Navy SEAL was talking about. So if you're going to teach the military, then you have those kind of techniques, and some martial arts people could be, able to do that sort of thing. But again, practice takes time. Skill takes time. That's why they call it Kung Fu, right?
Very true.
Skill
Very
developed
true.
with time. Exactly.
Well, personally, I had one student who was a police officer, and of course, I have no knowledge about his training and his method and so forth. But he was telling, while I was teaching him, and because I try to incorporate the martial art applications in the form, and I teach.
That's good. A lot of people don't.
I think that makes sense because they know what they're doing, right?
Sure.
Otherwise,
of course.
why should the hands to be?
Why are you doing this? Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
What's this all
does
about?
That matter?
Yeah.
Does that matter? Should my hands to be so far apart or so close or anything? So I think if I can explain to them and what the usages are, and then it help them to understand and then to memorize the movement much better. So so when I was explaining to him, then sometimes he was, that's very good. I can think about many situations. I could incorporate this movement, this maneuvering in there. Of course, I'm not trained in the police, tactics or anything. So that's good. And another thing he really appreciated is because his job is so stressful. And he said Tai Chi really helped him to bring back the calmness and so forth. So I guess for that perspective, and it definitely has it can be very helpful.
Doing Tai Chi Chuan or meditation and or both for any people with highly stressful jobs is extremely good for them.
Yes. And good for their health, both physical and mental health. But you're right, and this is not to say, we are able to teach people in just the weekend training, whatever. And my student, he learned with me for a few years, a couple of years. So it's a very different type of things. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, it's
Let me tell you a quick little story before we end on this. The very first time I went to Ohio, we went up there to teach the prison guards, and we were actually teaching them in the prison. So we had to go all into the prison, into one of the large rooms they'd set up for us to train in. Well, we'd flown up to Ohio, and the night before we got there, when we got there, we were up before the day we went to the prison. We had a hotel, and we went out to eat. And so I saw this menu had this great, huge, beautiful omelet on it. Oh my gosh, it was so wonderful. And I ate this omelet and it felt great. And then I went home and I was sleeping. And about 3 a.m, I woke up and ran into the bathroom and was sick as a dog. I had food poisoning.
Oh my God.
And when you have food poisoning, your joints ache, your head aches, everything hurts. And I was with my student who was helping me doing the video, Bob Castaldo. And I said, Bob, I think I'm dying. Bob, oh my God. And Bob says, we don't have a car. And he just rolled over and went back to sleep. I said, okay, well, I'm going to just lay in here by the bathroom and, just be in here. He said, okay. So about 7 o'clock, he wakes me up on the floor in the bathroom and says, we've got to go teach at the prison. I was weak as a kitten. And we go through there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to go in here and stand on the mat and talk and, impress these guys. Well, I look up at the door, Violet, and the 2 guys come to the door and they had to duck to come through the door. One guy was 6'7".
Whoa.
He looked like a Wookiee, from Star Wars. He was huge. And the other guy would just barely kind of ducked and went under it. And I looked at him, I said, why do you want to learn hand-to-hand combat stuff from me? You're so huge, you just scare everybody to death. And he took a look at me standing on the mat, and he just drew back his fist and threw a punch at me, just like that. Luckily, I stepped in front of it, so the fist went behind me, and I spun around, and it threw him to the ground. And I was as surprised as anybody else, because I was almost like I'd been up drunk all night long. I was so weak, from losing everything in my body, basically.
But you're a master. It's all in you. So
yeah, it's already there.
Yeah, it's a split moment, and then it just kick in, right?
Yeah. So I looked down at the guy and I said, "Well, I can show you how to do that." And he gets up and he says, "Okay, that's just fine. If you can do that to me, then by golly, we'll all listen to you." And from that point on, I had no more problems. But man, a couple of times we'd go to sheriff's departments in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
First thing would happen, some guy would go for you. I mean, if you don't know how to really fight, you're in trouble, because they're going to clock you in the side of the head. They're going to, because here's why. They think, I could be home watching football. I don't have to be here to learn this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If this guy can't show me something, then what do I need to be here for?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can't show them something right off the bat, all of them will turn around and walk out.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it happen. So we just, almost every time we went, or one of my other guys went to teach for us, we always invited the biggest, toughest looking guy up on the mat and had him throw a punch or try to grab us. And after we put him down, we had everybody's attention. And that's not necessarily the way it happens in some martial arts schools, because you asked me about the martial arts thing. That's why I don't think it's always a good idea, because even though a lot of martial artists have sparred, and a lot of martial artists have maybe fought in full contact or whatever, very few of them have this kind of
real life
survival
experience.
attitude and experience
Mm-hmm.
to handle some guy who just throws a punch just out of the blue. They call it, a sucker punch or whatever. And, there are a couple of times I got clocked a couple of times, but I was still able to take the guy down and put him in handcuffing position. And that's what the Rangers did. That's what we did in our work. And as I reached where I am now, I'm 80 years old. That time is pretty much behind me right now. I'm not going to travel and do that kind of thing anymore. I'd rather play with my grandkids and have some fun. We still got a lot of other people out there that know our methods, and they're still teaching them. So the Rangers did their job, I think. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And then, like we talked previously, like you're John Panther, but there's Johnny Appleseeds, right? You also did a lot of these kind of work, and you train a lot of people, and who can go around and then train others. Well, thank you very much, John, and I really enjoyed our talk today, and thank you very much. And
I appreciate it. I love it. Thank you so much. You're a great interviewer. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.